Yes, it's true. I've been a lifelong democratic socialist all my life. I don't know any other way economically to make sense of this world. And while I am a democratic socialist who's been a pretty much probably the first Bernie bro online dating back to the 1990s, I am going to get in touch with my inner libertarian side, left libertarian. Um, let's talk about Ron Paul. Ron Paul has a program online called Liberty Report, and and from my perspective, I'm kind of 50-50 when he's talking about domestic civil liberties and things of that nature. As a civil libertarian, my ideology sometimes overlap with people who are on the libertarian side of the equations, and that's going to be the case if you're on the left. And and I will, I could go into the ideology of libertarianism in a few minutes, but the thing about it is that Ron Paul has his show, and it's actually I watch it. It's interesting. Don't always agree with it, especially when he gets into economics. But I digress. I wouldn't expect. Let's see. I wouldn't expect Ron Paul will watch secular talk with Kyle Kalinske and think, I like his take on Medicare for all. I just don't see that happening. But I digress again. Um, During the program last week, presumably September 25th, um, he Ron Paul was doing his program, and he was talking, and he stopped talking as if he was trying to force himself to talk, but he couldn't talk, and his face started to do the droop, like the lip started to droop a little bit, which tends to be the signs of a possible stroke. Nevertheless, Ron Paul was sent to the hospital, and for what I've heard, that he's doing well when he went to the hospital. I haven't heard exactly 100% what happened, but for all intents and purposes, most people think he had a possible mini stroke. The man's 85 years old. It's bound to happen. Um, it is. And but apparently he's doing okay, and I am glad he's doing okay. I tell you the truth, I've always respected Ron Paul. I don't know, as I said, I don't agree with him on everything, obviously, especially when it comes to economics. But I've always had a soft spot for Ron Paul. Um, uh, well, anyway, he started off in his regular profession before he entered politics. He was a medical doctor. He became a Republican congressman in Texas from 1976 to 77, and again 1979 through 85, and from 1997 to 2013. In 1988, he was the Libertarian candidate for president. So he was a Republican who became a Libertarian. Um, And I remember when I first heard of Ron Paul, it was on the Morton Downey show in June 1988. Um, what was what was interesting was the subject of drug legalization, and I remember at that age, and I was 19 years old. It's like at that point I haven't done any drugs. The only thing I was doing at that time, at the age of 19, I was a cigarette smoker. Okay, I was a cigarette smoker, and I didn't really do anything until I went to college, and then when I went to college, that's when the drugs kind of started dancing into my life. I was like a pot, LSD, type of guy. I've done the mushrooms once, didn't like it. Uh, no other illegals I've done. I drank, you know, but I digress. But I digress a whole lot. Morton Downey was, being the typical douche that he was at that time. He was Rush Limbaugh before there was a Rush Limbaugh. Um, and he was sitting there just being an asshole to Ron Paul and the Guardian Angels, which I remember watching an episode of Archie Bunker's Place, which was a spinoff of the original All in the Family. And he remember running across the Guardian Angels, and he looked at them with their berets and everything. He said, "I like it better when you people did crime." Anyway, um, these self-righteous twits, who I guess mean well. I mean, nobody's for crime, but these people are just their high horse and and trying to curtail civil liberties in the name of fighting crime. And they were sitting there just shitting on Ron Paul. But I'm gonna tell you one thing: Ron Paul fought back, and as far as I was concerned, he won. He won, and Morton Downey was a loser. The Guardian Angels were the loser, and the people that were booing and hissing at Ron Paul were losers. And I was like, I like this guy. And I was watching it with my dad, and I asked him about libertarianism, and my dad, he was, Republican. My dad would be what you would call a moderate paleo conservative at the time and everything, and he was uh he was telling me then that yeah, Ron Paul's what you call libertarian, and he's going to support some liberal causes, but for very conservative reasons. And that libertarianism will take liberal causes for very conservative reasons, advance liberal causes, but they're further right wing than mainstream conservatives. That's how he explained it to me. So I've always found that ideology to be very curious. And then as I became politicized over the years, I found out what libertarianism was all about. But for some reason, I have forgotten about Ron Paul throughout those years. As the 1990s went forward, but I certainly ran across many libertarians over the years. And so I got quite acquainted with libertarianism, even with my own socialist transformation in the around 1994 when I decided that when they called me a socialist, I guess people were right. I'm not trying to say this all about me, but anyway, I'm just giving you my take on this whole Ron Paul thing. So I almost forgot all about Ron Paul, and 9/11 happened. And of course, with 9/11, George W. Bush did the worst thing that somebody could do over the crisis, and that is to try to suspend as much as he could domestic civil liberties, attack a country that did not attack us, and just be smug about it. And that was him in a nutshell. And I did not realize this at the time, but apparently Ron Paul was opposed to the Congressional Medal of Honor being awarded to Prime Minister Tony Blair. And when it was brought into my attention why he opposed it, and as I said, I was a socialist myself at that point, and my contention with Tony Blair, it was that he was he transformed the British Labour Party away from socialism, and he was doing things that would kind of make Margaret Thatcher wink with approval. But Ron Paul's opposition to Tony Blair, and I thought he was a douche at that point for saying this. He's like, "Well, Tony Blair is a leader of the Labour Party, which is a socialist party, the party that brought socialized medicine to Great Britain." And so I'm just like, okay, on that one, I'm just like, yeah, fuck off, Ron Paul. But And so, just kind of like about him when I got reacquainted with him and started kind of following him again because I follow people from across the political spectrum. But by 2008, he ran for president in the Republican primaries. And as he was running for the primaries in 2008, I was a Dennis Kucinich supporter. And if you don't know who Dennis Kucinich is, he's a congressman, was a congressman from the Cleveland area in Ohio. I forgot the number of the district. But anyway, and I saw the hatchet job they did to Dennis Kucinich in 2008, and again in 2004, and again in 2008. Well, the way they were treating Dennis Kucinich in the Democratic primaries, trying to ignore him. Well, I saw them doing the same thing. The Republicans, Fox News, were treating Ron Paul in exactly the same way that the CNN people were treating Dennis Kucinich. And I saw that, and I was just thinking to myself, wait a minute. He's the only one that's making sense, and they're trying to belittle him. They're trying to shut him up. They're trying to ignore him. He's the only one that's. He's like, I would never vote Republican, but of all these people running in the Republican primaries in 2008, I was like, he's the only one that's making anything that's close to being, sensical. And people like on talk radio, people like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Mark Levin, they were just crapping on Ron Paul left and right. I mean, they were just everything that Ron Paul was about: his anti-interventionism, his opposition to torture, his opposition to the Patriot Act, his wanting the United States to stop the drug war altogether. Uh, you know, um, these social issues of letting gays and lesbians live their lives as gays and lesbians at that time when there was not even such a thing as gay marriage, in the context of mass support for it at that time. I mean, this is why a lot of Republicans, when the whole talk of libertarianism back then was brought up, they were like, well, we like their economics, but we don't want to legalize drugs, and we don't want to give gay people rights. And that's pretty much why Republicans who would be receptive to the philosophy of libertarianism, they kind of get squeamish because they they want to continue the drug war, and they want Christian Sharia, and libertarianism is opposed to that. And plus, libertarians hate attacking other countries for no reason, like with this war with Iraq that took place. Well, and I started to think to myself, I respect this guy. I mean, he pissed me off what he said about socialism a few years ago earlier, but no, I like Ron Paul. I respect him. So anyway, he ran again in the year 2012, and again they did the same thing. They were crapping on him as they did before. Mm. I mean, when you had a bunch of insane people like Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann and Rick Santorum and people like that, I'm like, and then you have Thurston Hall the third, Mitch Romney. Um, you know, uh, the difference between Mitt Romney and Thurston Hall the third is that Mitt Romney is a Mormon, and Thurston Hall the third, I know he's a fictional character, but he's presumably an Episcopalian. So that's like the big difference between the two. But again, Ron Paul was treated like a pariah by certain people. Although I do think libertarianism started gaining a little more of attraction within the Republican Party, through the what I would call the benevolent side of the Tea Party movement. And believe me, it hurts me to even acknowledge that there was a benevolent side to it. But when I say that there's a benevolent side to the Tea Party movement, I mean, and one of my libertarian friends understood what I was saying about the two wings of libertarianism. He There were a little humor when I will say that Ron Paul represents the liberal or the left wing of the Tea Party movement, while Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann represents the batshit, cuckoo, crazy, lunatic, fringe, nut job side of the Tea Party. So, so there you have it. And I'm digress, and I'm going to go forward to this. I'm talking real fast. Um, because I need to get some sleep soon. But Ron Paul remained consistent, opposing the Patriot Act, opposing the Iraq War, and opposing pretty much all military preemptive military invasions, and wants the U.S. to pull back from all over the world. Ron Paul wants to challenge the military industrial complex. I mean, and when you have people like that doing these sort of things, um, opposition to the torture, and recently, domestically, Ron Paul decided death penalty shouldn't be a state issue. The death penalty is just wrong. So he is now opposed to capital punishment. So I have grown to really respect Ron Paul. I still think his economics is garbage, and Ron Paul doesn't know me, but Ron Paul would probably think I was garbage because I'm a socialist, but I don't care. I do respect Ron Paul, and I'm wish him the most speedy recovery and a sense of good normalcy restored in his life. Only thing I would say about Ron Paul is that his son, Rand Paul, is a little bit more disappointing because he's more of a conventional Republican. Now, don't get me wrong. Um, on some of the same issues that I like Rand Paul does echo those themes. Probably not quite as loud, but he seems to echo those themes. And so he's the Republican I can tolerate in the Senate, in spite of some really, really, really horrible positions he has on some economic questions. As I said, I kind of respect Rand Paul a little bit too, but not as much as his father. But while when I am kind of goodwill toward Rand Paul, a limited goodwill. I would also say fuck him for trying to implement national right to work laws. That doesn't set very well with me. And on healthcare and all that, terrible positions. But again, he seems to want to challenge the military-industrial complex, and he's also reluctant about interventionism abroad, and opposed to torture, opposed to the Patriot Act, and for that, I do have to give kudos to his son too. But suffice to say, I just wanted to talk real quick about the situation with Ron Paul. And here's the thing: Ron Paul has worked with Dennis Kucinich in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's worked with Congressman Bernie Sanders when he was in the U.S. House of Representatives. And the wonderful thing about libertarians and people who are on the left, who are kind of who have kind of their own version of libertarianism, certainly not in economics, they can work together and meet common ground while not giving up their positions. And so, Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich, or Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders, when he was in the House, will work on trying to put a stop, try to withdraw the troops from Iraq. Their opposition to the Patriot Act again. Their oppositions to to our civil liberties being poured down the drain. They're on the same page, and for these reasons, it's easier to make friends with libertarians. I remember during the Bush Cheney years, I would go to these protests, and I said this before, almost like every other weekend, I would be at some protest or another, and there was always a contingent of libertarians out there, and we would sit there and talk and exchange ideas, and it was nothing, no animosity. Had no more animosity toward libertarians than I would the Trotskyite people that would be out there, with the ISO, International Socialist Organization, trying to sell the Socialist Worker magazine. I mean, either way, you know, we're all out there to acknowledge that the Bush Cheney wars were evil, and we were out there to say let's put a stop to this nonsense. So anyhow, I ranted long enough, and I will be getting some sleep fairly soon. But I just wanted to talk about the situation with Ron Paul. And Ron Paul, I hope that you recover fully, and that you keep on fighting the good fight on areas where I happen to agree with you. And I'm just going to have to respectfully decline in supporting some of the positions that I may not care for that you advocate. And I would expect you to feel the same way about people like myself on the economic questions. But I do wish Ron Paul all the best. And as I said, I ranted long enough. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you were triggered, comment anyway. Feel free to share this content or any other content I have on this channel. And as a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you that if you feel passionate about something and have a platform, or don't, but I urge you to go get a platform and express yourselves, because we're all the muckrakers of our time. And most importantly, you hit that subscribe button. This channel is growing, and we need to make it relevant. So only you can help make this happen. And for all the people who have subscribed, thank you very much. Please, thank you. And I hope I won't disappoint you. But until next time, peace. And Bernie Sanders for president in the year 2024.